Welcome back. In the previous video, we looked at the foundation of your fretboard by learning the basics of triads. If you've not yet seen that, we'll link to it in the description. Now it's time to take your playing to the next level with 5 awesome triad tricks. Now, these tricks will help you to create some unique chord voicings, add some melodic interest to your playing, and really unlock some new creative possibilities all across the fretboard. Whether you're looking to add depth and dimension to your playing, or you simply want to explore some new creative avenues for you to play around with on Sundays, these triad tricks are guaranteed to inspire you. So grab your guitar and let's dive in. What I'm about to show you is 5 cool triad tricks that you can use to basically transform triads and take that foundation we've looked at in the previous video and really come up with new and inventive ways to play things on the guitar. Our following videos will go deep into each one of these 5 things because it's going to be too much for us to cover in one video. In this video, I just want to give you an overview of what these 5 things are. Before we dive in, if you want to have a handy reference, check out the link in the description for our triad cheat sheet, and you can also find a link to our triad masterclass. So let's go ahead and check out our first triad trick, which is called removing a note from a triad to create some cool diads on the guitar. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I play simple triads that we've looked at in the previous video, let's say I'm going to do G, C, E minor, D, then I can play G, C, E minor, and D. Or I can play G, C, E minor, and D. And finally I can do G, C, E minor, and D. 3 different places on the guitar neck to play that 1-4-6-5 progression. If I use a dirty sound with those triads, it's going to kind of sound like this. Nothing inherently wrong with that, but the chords are a little bit dense with all 3 of those notes being so close to each other and using a dirty tone that I've just done. Instead of playing the full triads, I can transform these triads by simply removing the middle note. So instead of playing, I'm just going to play this. And instead of playing, I'm just going to play that. And instead of playing a D, I'm going to play this. So that means I can play G, I can play C, I can play E minor, and I can play D. So these are our famous 4-2 diad voicings on the guitar, which we've covered at length on this channel. So let me go ahead and just demonstrate real quick what I can do with these diads when I play it over a progression like this. Check it out. So if you've looked at any of our other videos on this channel, you would have seen this in action a lot. And now you know where they come from. It's simply taking a triad and removing that middle note. And then what you're going to end up with is simply 3 different shapes that you can play any major or any minor chord. We'll dive more into that in the upcoming video. Our second tip is all about rearranging the notes of the triads to better understand the fretboard. Now, first tip, we simply remove the note. Our second tip, we are going to rearrange the notes. So let's go ahead and look at what I mean by that. If I take a G major triad like this, then those are my 3 notes. In this instance, it's B, D, G. But you know, instead of playing it over here in that order, or instead of playing it over here in this order, as it relates to the B note, That's a simple first inversion. Now, if I want to rearrange the notes of that shape, where in this instance I'm playing it on strings 3, 2, and 1, I can also play it on strings 3 and 2, with 1 note on 3 and 2 notes on 2. Or I can play 2 notes on string 3 and 1 note on string 2. Or I can play all the notes on the G string. That is really a great way of learning your fretboard inside and out, because then you can actually see where those same notes exist in other areas of the guitar. I can do the same with C. And I can do the same with E minor. And I can do the same with D. So that helps you to move from playing simple chord shapes to actually playing single notes on the guitar, which is what I'm going to just show you real quick what I can do. The first time I'm going to play the traditional triad shapes with a bit of picking. And then a second time, I'm going to rearrange them on the guitar to show you different ways in which I can play those same notes to open up the fretboard and some melodic possibilities. Here we go. Alright, so what you've just seen there is simple triads for demonstration purposes to show you that I can play a triad on string 3-2-1, or 3-2-2, or 3-3-2, or 3-3-3. 4 different ways to play a simple triad, and what we'll do in future videos is we'll show you how to unlock that. But the basic premise behind this is this. When you are playing a song, there's a certain set of chords that are being played on the song. And most people, when they want to try and play lead lines, or they want to come up with some cool hooks, or whatever the case may be, they tend to just grab a scale and then hope for the best. It's kind of like shooting in the dark. When you know how to play these triads across the neck, like I've just shown you, then you'll know exactly what notes to hit, no matter what chord you are playing, because you know how to find the notes, not just in the chord shape, but how they are being rearranged and spread out over the guitar neck. There's one other way in which you can play these chord shapes as well, which is making use of what we call open triads. So for example, if I play a G triad like this, I can take this B note, the middle note, and I can move it down an octave. And I get that sound. Or I can take the C triad like this. I can take the middle note down an octave. And then I can take an E minor triad like this. And I can take the middle note down an octave. I have to fret it a little bit differently. And then I get a D triad like this. Let's do this one, for example. Take the middle note and take that down an octave. The result is that you get these really orchestral, epic sounding voicings, which is an open triad. Here I have G, C, E minor, D, or G, C, E minor, D, or I have G, C, E minor, and D. And everything that I've just played there right now is simply triads, but I'm just rearranging where you can play the notes on the fretboard, resulting in open triads in that case when we take the middle note of a triad and we move it down an octave. And I'll show you how to do that in detail in our upcoming video. So make sure that you subscribe, because then you'll get notifications when we release the following videos in this triad series. Now, our third way to look at is replacing a note within the triad to create some more interesting sounding voicings. Option 1 was to remove a note in the triad. Option 2 was to rearrange the notes of the triad. And now we're going to look at replacing a note within the triad to create some more interesting sounding voicings. So what do I mean by that? So I have my G triad, string 3, 2, and 1. So any one of these notes on string 3, 2, or 1, I can either play the next note in the scale, here on string 1, the higher note, or the lower note. Or on the second string, I can play the higher note, or the lower note. And on the third string, I can play the higher note, or the lower note. And that's a great way in which you can come up with some really cool sounding voicings. What I've got here is G add 9, or G major 7, or G6, or G add 4, or G sus4, or G sus2. Back to a G. Alright, now let me give you an example of what that might sound like when I take the triads that we've been looking at so far. G, C, E minor, and D. But I'm going to then change the triads. I'm going to play this for G, this for C, this for E minor, and this for D. Simply changing one of those notes. So I'm replacing the note with another note in the scale. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. So what I did there in the end is I played a G add 4, a C sus2, an E minor 7, and a D sus4. We'll go ahead and dive deeper into that in the upcoming video in a series, but that's how you can go ahead and totally transform the sound of a triad by replacing one of the notes. So what we've done to date is we've removed the note, we've rearranged the notes, we've gone ahead and replace the note, and what we're going to do now is we're going to add a note. And when you add a note to the existing triad shape, then you can go ahead and create some very cool melodic sounding lines and create a lot of melodic interest, because in addition to those triad notes, which in essence are just the chord tones, I then go ahead and add a note that is not a chord tone to bring in some color and texture to a voicing. Now, the best way to do this is when you actually play your triads using the second method that I've shown you, which is rearranging the notes. So I can play G like this instead of this, right? Then I'm going to do G, C, E minor, E minor, and D. So what I can now do, instead of just playing the plain vanilla triads, I can go ahead and find the notes to add. So for the G, I can do. So can you see I still had my triad notes, but I'm adding the C note and the F sharp note, which will then give me this. And then for C, I can add the D note and the F sharp note. And then for E, I can add the D and the F sharp note. And then for D, I can add the D note, and then I can also add the G note. Or I can go from the A note, and I can add the B note, slide up to the D, add the E note, and go to the F sharp. So in essence, I still just have my plain vanilla triads, but I'm adding 2 notes. And then for C, I'm adding 2 notes. For E minor, I'm adding these 2 notes. And then for D, I'm adding the B note as well as the E note. So let's go ahead and play a line with this, making use of triads that I've rearranged on single strings, and then I'm adding an extra note for some color and texture to bring some melodic interest into my playing. There you can see what you can do when you start adding in some extra notes to the triad. I can imagine why it's important for you to first understand how to actually get the triad notes on the guitar by using the second method in our process here, rearranging the notes, and then we are simply adding a note. There's so much more to cover, and I've got a whole detailed video coming up about adding notes to your triads in this series. So make sure you subscribe, hit that bell icon. You'll get notifications when we release that video. Now that brings us to our 5th method in this framework. First of all, we removed the note, we rearranged the notes, we replaced the note, and we added the note. And our 5th and final section here is all about shifting the triad. What that means is when you are shifting triads, you can use simple triad shapes to go ahead and give you what we call upper extension voicings. So real quick, what does that mean? When you look at how a triad is built, it's simply stacked thirds on top of each other. So I have C, E, G, and that gives me a C triad. Or yeah. But what happens if I keep adding another third on top of that? Well, then I'm going to have C, E, G, B. And this is going to give me this awesome sounding chord, which is a C major 7th. Or you can play it like this. Play it like that. And that's a major 7th chord. You also get the same if I were to do it on A. I'll have like this, A, C, E, which gives me a C, E, a minor triad. But if I stack another third on top of it, A, C, E, G, now I get what's known as an A minor 7th chord. And that one can be played like this. It can be played like that. There's many different ways in which you play these 7th chords. Now, when you study something like jazz, then you're definitely going to be learning major 7ths, minor 7ths, dominant 7ths. You're going to also learn altered chords like 7 sharp 5 or a 7 flat 9. Those are awesome sounding chords, but it takes quite a while to get your head around it, and you really have to be all in on learning how to play a style like jazz where those 4 voiced and also those other chords exist. Now, You also get them when you play traditional gospel. That was really used a lot within those styles. But in modern worship, it's not used as much. You definitely do get them, but for the most part, it's triads, sus4s, sus2s, or add 9s, etc. Now, you do get some bands that obviously have used a little bit more sophisticated harmony. Then they'll use these major 7s, minor 7s, and so forth. But what I want to show you is how you can actually just take these triads that I've shown you already, and then you can go ahead and get some interesting sounds by simply moving the shapes. So what that means, a fancy word for that is we are superimposing a triad over another chord. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I play a C triad like this, and that's my chord right there. But if I play an E minor triad, just these 3 notes, and I play it over a C bass note, then I'm gonna get that C major sound. To time out for a second, all we are doing is the chord chart might show us to play a C chord, but instead of playing a C chord, we're gonna play an E minor triad. Then I'm gonna get that super cool sounding C major 7. So here's my C again with an E minor triad. And I'm gonna get a C major 7th. Or over here I've got a C note with an E minor triad, and I get that C major 7 sound. So that's an example. We are superimposing a different triad over what is written. So if the chord chart says C, I'm not going to play a C triad. I'm going to play an E minor triad, and that's going to go ahead and give me what's known as a C major 7th. In the same way, instead of playing a G triad, when the chord chart says G, I can play a B minor triad, and then I'm going to get G major 7. When the chord chart says C, I'm going to play E minor to get C major 7th. Now when the chord chart then says E minor, I'm going to play a G triad, which gives me E minor 7th. And then if I wanted to be a little bit fancy, when the chord chart says D, I can first play a C triad to give me a flat 7, a 9, and an 11th. All right, those are the upper extensions over a D chord. And that's how you can start getting some of these jazzy colors, some of these more sophisticated colors into your playing by simply using triads and not having to go ahead and learn all of those dense voicing. So typically when you listen to jazz, if it's driven by guitar like Wes Montgomery or whatever the case may be, they are kind of the main instrument that has to provide all of the harmony. So there's a lot of space for them to play these big chords and do all these awesome things. But when you play modern worship, there's typically 2 electrics, an acoustic or 2 acoustic guitars, there's a piano player, keys player, there's a whole bunch of backing vocals, there's the lead singer, and sometimes you have other instruments like maybe a saxophone or a violin or a cello. So harmonically speaking, there's not a lot of space. So when you learn typical jazz voicings, they're not really going to work so well in a modern worship environment because it's not going to be able to cut through the mix. That's why we love our 4/2 voicings so much, because they get to do exactly that. And when you do triads, you can still get the more sophisticated sound on your guitar without having to fight for space and actually getting your big chords to be lost in the mix. So let me go ahead and play that for you right now with the backing track we've been using. And just, I'm going to do, instead of G triad, I'm going to play a B minor to give me G major 7. Instead of playing a C triad, I'm going to play E minor to give me C major 7th. Instead of playing an E minor triad, I'm going to play a G major triad to give me E minor 7th. And then for the D, I'm briefly going to play the C triad over that to give me that flat 7th, 9th, and 11th voicings before resolving it back to a D. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like. Alright, so I obviously forced a triad over each one of the chords for demonstration purposes in a teaching environment like this. But the point here is that by shifting those triads, you are able to access some of those more sophisticated sounds, major sevenths, minor sevenths, ninths, 11ths, all these kind of things by using a simple triad and just shifting it like I've demonstrated. So then you can go ahead and unlock some new sounds on your guitar using these simple voicings I've shown you so far in this video series. Now, I'm sure you agree that all these triad tricks are pretty much game changers, because by removing the notes, by rearranging the notes, by replacing notes, adding notes, or shifting the triad shapes, you can create a wide variety of exciting chord voicings and new melodic approaches on the fretboard that's guaranteed to take your worship guitar skills to the next level. Now remember, these tricks are just the beginning. This was an overview of this video, and in the upcoming videos in this series, we're going to be diving deeper into each one of these concepts, and we'll be exploring even more ways to apply them to your playing. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, hit that bell icon. You'll get notifications whenever we release new videos like this, and also be sure to check the links in the description for a triad cheat sheet as well as our triad masterclass. But guys, hope you enjoy this, and if this was a little bit new for you and you want to get a refresher on the basics of triads, this is a great video to check out.